Good morning and welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to talk about hybrid cloud storage and in particular Microsoft Azure StorSimple, which provides integration of cloud services and on-premise storage. A quick introduction to me, my name is Paul Collins and I lead the cloud and infrastructure team at SOL-TEC. On the call with me I have Matt Biggs, a senior member of our team, and Wes Jackson, one of our StorSimple consultants. Also privileged to have Ben Watson on the call with us, who's available to answer Q&A. Ben is the Microsoft UK lead for StorSimple. So without further ado, I'll jump into our agenda. So a quick run through of what we're going to do today on this webinar. We'll review some of the pain points associated with storage today, and then we'll look at what StorSimple solutions are all about and how you can benefit from them. We will discuss the workloads that our customers are placing on StorSimple, and then we'll take a closer look at the feature set and benefits of the 8000 series. We've also got a demo of failing over an appliance, so we can see some of the disaster recovery capabilities which are quite exciting within the StorSimple solution. Then we'll talk about next steps should you be interested in learning more, and then anybody who's got some questions for Ben at the end, he'll run through those with us. So if you are dialing in, please, if you could mute your microphone, or if you're on a mobile, just mute that too. The IM window is being manned by Wes, so if you've got any questions, you can fire them across IM, and then we'll unmute everything at the end there for Q&A with Ben. Okay, so let's start with storage challenges. So we are hearing from our customers that data is growing fast, and whether you believe your data is growing by 20%, 30%, 50%, whatever number you think it is, you could probably be sure it's a lot. And it's driving decisions that IT people, IT pros and managers would rather not have to make. And it's a simple fact, the more data we have to store, the more stuff we need to look after it. And by stuff I mean storage arrays, the disk shelves, disks, networking to connect storage to servers and so on. To make things harder for us, there are never-ending problems with backup and disaster recovery. So a lot of us are still using tape for backup, and because of the time and effort that go into managing tape-based backup and the inevitable mistakes that we make when rotating and managing tapes, it's quite frankly a challenge we could do without. And all of this is compounded further as our data sets get bigger and keep growing, and this is costing IT teams both in terms of money and time and effort spent managing all this stuff that I mentioned earlier. Also, we find a lot of IT teams and IT managers we speak to are desperate to find a way to simplify and improve their DR capabilities, and especially with respect to recovery and recovery testing. And we hear that actually testing DR and testing recovery is something that's rarely practiced, really, just because staging a disaster takes more time and resources than we actually have available to us. Also, you know, when we do this, we're doing this as a planned recovery event, and that in itself throws up a heap of questions. So where do we put all of the data we're trying to restore? What happens to our production operations? You know, are we going to cause some kind of horrendous service impacting issue by actually trying to test DR? And perhaps most importantly, do we really learn anything when the goal of this sort of DR recovery test becomes not upsetting this status quo or indeed causing an outage? So along with with all of this complexity comes costs, and really costs are different things for different people, and for some of us it's hardware investment and hardware upgrades that seemingly never stop, and for others it's software licenses which may enable storage array features. It could be the data center footprint, power and cooling costs, and there are also costs associated with the IT pro's time that's dedicated to looking after storage, and maybe we've got backup administrators and backup teams. And also, as IT managers, we also have to face the constant threat of running out of available capacity and having to stretch our budget to purchase more storage to meet business demands. And also, I guess often overlooked, is the opportunity cost that storage exerts on our organisations in terms of missed opportunities to do something transformational with our IT, as opposed to focusing on just sort of trying to deal with our storage growth. To be honest, we could spend a lot of time, I could open up and unmute the mics talking about how these things overlap and compound each other, but the simple fact is that as data keeps growing, it creates an environment that is never quite stable and always at risk. Okay then, so what is hybrid cloud storage? What's StorSimple and what can it do for us? So without overcomplicating things, StorSimple is a physical storage appliance. You install it in a rack in your data center, just like you would any other traditional storage array. And as you would expect for an enterprise storage array, it's got redundant controllers, power supplies and disks. And once we've got it racked in our data centers, it integrates with hosts, regardless of whether they're Windows, Linux, Hyper-V or VMware, using either 1 gig or 10 gig iSCSI. So really that in itself is nothing unusual, right? Nothing out of the ordinary. But as you'd expect, there's a little bit of a twist. Otherwise we probably wouldn't be hosting this webinar. And we have some clever stuff which happens within the appliance itself. And that includes data tiering, deduplication and compression. And we'll cover those in a little bit more depth as we move through today's webinar. But firstly, and perhaps most importantly, the local StorSimple device integrates seamlessly with the Microsoft Azure cloud storage platform. And this allows us to in effect virtualize cloud storage with local storage and present this to our servers within our data centers as a single storage pool. We don't need to modify how our servers or applications work to see the storage pool. It's presented over iSCSI, and as far as the server is concerned, it looks and behaves like a traditional storage volume. So the net result of this is a small hardware footprint for storage with huge scalability. And to provide some context to that statement, the entry-level model, we can provide 200 terabytes of storage in a 2U form factor, which is pretty impressive, I think. Also, as I touched on earlier, the StorSimple solution provides a really neat data protection and disaster recovery capability. And again, we'll cover that in a little bit more depth later on, and we do have a demo of device failover as well. So all elements of a StorSimple solution can easily be managed from a single pane of glass, and that management portal is available within the Azure portal itself. And that actually includes the management and monitoring of the physical on-premise storage appliances or storage arrays themselves, so we can monitor those anywhere where we've got access to the Azure portal. At the heart of our solution is Microsoft Azure, and more specifically Azure Storage. So let's take a minute to look at this. If we're going to store data in the cloud, we need to be really comfortable that the cloud storage platform is secure and robust. And we don't want to take any risk with our data once it's left our data center, because doing that is just not acceptable. So the Microsoft Azure storage platform is highly available, it's very resilient, and it's just staggeringly well architected with just humongous scale. The very nature of cloud storage means that it's available to us pretty much wherever we can access the internet, and that's important to remember when we look at the StorSimple DR capabilities a bit later on. So I'm going to talk for a moment just about the Europe region when it comes to storage, because I think that applies to most of us on the call. So within Europe, there are two data centres. The North European data centre is in Dublin, with the West Europe data centre being in Amsterdam. And from a StorSimple perspective, when the StorSimple device does write to the Azure cloud platform, it writes to one region. The data is then geo-replicated to the secondary data centre by the underlying Azure storage mechanisms, which actually asynchronously write to the secondary data centre. So this provides us with regional resiliency, allowing storage to remain available should an event impact an entire region. And within the data center itself, the storage platform actually keeps 3 copies of the data, both in the primary and secondary data centers. So 3 copies in Dublin, 3 copies in Amsterdam, which gives us local resiliency as well. So we really do have a durable, highly available cloud storage solution with massive scale that we can take advantage of with StorSimple. And on a webinar is perhaps not the right place for this, so I don't want to get into too much detail around official accreditations and certifications, but I will quickly state that Azure does hold the government official accreditation, which means Azure is accredited to hold or transact public sector data for business conducted at the official level of security classification. If you do have concerns regarding data security and privacy in the Azure cloud, then happy to cover those one-to-one, or we can pick them up in the Q&A after. I don't want to dwell too much on there, but the Microsoft Trust Center for Azure is a great place to go to answer any of these sorts of questions you may have around compliance, security in the cloud. So moving on, I guess most importantly, what's in this for you? And when you look at storage today, we typically see there's various facets of storage. So we have our primary storage, archival storage, disk-based backup, tape-based backup, archival storage, and offsite storage. And even then, when we just focus on primary storage alone, we typically find we've got multiple tiers of primary storage, and that's often based upon workloads and performance requirements, sometimes based upon recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives. So, I mean, looking at that, we can see we've then got multiple tiers typically within our primary storage. So what we're trying to do with StorSimple, and what StorSimple can do really, really well, is take a big portion out of our primary and archival storage requirements and reduce the cost and expense of data protection by eliminating disk and tape-based backups. And we can also reduce the complexity and costs associated with DR by removing the need for SAN or any other replication technologies which you may be using to provide an offsite DR capability. So I'm confident that we can show you that using StorSimple really does improve data protection and data recoverability. In fact, our ability to test DR actually becomes a reality. And StorSimple also frees our storage administrators and IT pros from expending untold hours performing capacity planning, deploying storage, migrating data from array to array. And ultimately, the scalability of StorSimple prevents us from having to buy more capacity upgrades as our data sets continue to grow. So I probably haven't on this slide covered all the components which may make up your storage landscapes today, but I think it's pretty evident that there are a lot of details and moving parts that to be honest are just a lot simpler when you can automate them with online cloud storage. So what we're saying on our slide is that storage costs are reduced by 40-60%. In my experience, with our customers, that's certainly been the case. So really, I guess the bottom line here is that StorSimple can save money and time. So moving on to the next slide here, I want to spend a little bit of time now with you, sort of explaining some of the benefits of StorSimple. So hopefully, I've managed to convey the concept of this on-premise device, which is integrated into the Azure storage cloud, which provides us with a local storage tier, obviously the device itself in our rack, and our cloud tier being the Azure storage platform. And actually, on the device itself, we have two tiers of data here as well, these being SSD and hard disk drive. So what I'd like to try and illustrate with this slide is if we take a minute to look at what I'd like to call, I guess, a typical data lifecycle, we very much see that when data is first created, it's critical to the business. It needs to be consumed quickly and frequently, and as such, we need good performance for this data. So within StorSimple, this data sits on SSD. If we then look at our graph, as time passes, the access rate and requirements drop off, but the data is still accessed relatively frequently. And at this point, the data moves within StorSimple locally to our second tier of storage, which is SAS hard disk drive storage. If we then look further right and examine the cloud part of the graph, it shows us that as more time passes, the data we create and store, yeah, sure, it still needs to be available and accessible, but it's actually accessed much more rarely. And this is where we start tiering data off into the Azure cloud. The data pool is still accessible and available to us to use whenever we need it, but the costs for storing this data are a fraction of those associated with keeping it on our on-premise storage arrays. So, a bit more of a technical slide now to take a look at what happens when data comes into the StorSimple device. In essence, what I want to show you is how the data moves across our storage tiers. And firstly, it's important to clarify that we don't automatically tier any data into the cloud until a capacity threshold is reached on the local storage, and it's at this point we start tiering the oldest data to the cloud. So let's take a look at that in a little more detail. So when data is first written to the local StorSimple appliance, it hits the SSD tier. So we're writing data straight to SSD to land the data on the device. We're also writing directly to SSD, so we get a good read performance, because we immediately read this data back so that we can dedupe it. And we're obviously, like many other devices, using dedupe to physically reduce the amount of data we store, both locally and also in the cloud. So during this this process of reading the data back, we perform a data translation exercise, which converts data into what we in the StorSimple world like to call fingerprints. And from this point on, block data is managed as objects, so regardless of whether it's stored on premise or in the cloud. So really, I guess you could almost say that StorSimple is a hybrid object store for block data. And in fact, multiple storage functions are really linked to these single replicated fingerprints. So backup, DR, the archiving functions all use these same fingerprint objects. And this is really important as it means that often metadata is changed instead of copying data again and again for different purposes. So we're going to look a little bit later on about some of the efficiencies we have around what we call cloud-based snapshots, and that will explain that in a bit more detail there. So let's look back at our slide. As data is deduplicated, it's written down to another SSD tier, which is the most high-performing storage we have available to us. So the most actively read data resides in this SSD tier. And once data hits this tier, the StorSimple device starts to monitor all data activity, effectively ranking and tiering data based upon access. So as we need space on the device for data which is not accessed relative to everything else, starts to move down another local storage tier to the nearline SAS disks. At this point, the data is compressed in line. So now the data is deduped and compressed. So we continue monitoring for access now. And once the high capacity watermark is reached on this tier, we take the fingerprints, which are deemed to be the coldest, relatively speaking, of everything on the local storage appliance. They get encrypted using a 256 AES block cipher and are transferred via SSL to the Azure storage cloud. We see that on the slide there. So our coldest data, if you like, is sat out in the cloud. So if you consider the scenario we just kind of depicted on the slide, we've got a single volume presented to a host server which has some data on it. It could be some file data, let's say. That data has been deduplicated, compressed and encrypted, and actually resides in two distinct geographic locations, these being local on our device and in the cloud on Azure storage. However, what's really important to remember here is that this data, regardless of where it sits, be that on-premise or in the cloud, it is online and accessible to our host server. And the host, regardless of what OS it is running, or whether it's physical or virtual, has no idea that any of this has happened to the data. So, when the host then makes a request for a particular block of data, the fingerprint for that block, or that piece of data, if you will, is returned from the cloud, assuming that's where it resides, as it does on our slide there, and it is then written back to the SSD dedupe tier and returned to the host server, and the whole kind of data flow then begins again, and we keep monitoring for access. So we've spoken, and hopefully I've shown you how we can use StorSimple and the scalability of the cloud to address our data growth challenges, but we still need to think about the ever complicated and complex challenge of ensuring we protect our data, both in terms of providing service availability and also long-term data retention. And we need a solution that can scale to meet our data growth demands. And before I continue, I kind of, it's sort of a personal thing really, is that, you know, I've always maintained that just having a snapshot isn't really a backup, and as such can't be called a backup. But to be perfectly honest with you, StorSimple's kind of changed my mind, and I'll hopefully with this slide explain why that is. So, using StorSimple, we simplify data protection and DR by using something which I alluded to earlier called Cloud Snapshot. And quite simply put, this is a snapshot of a volume, or it could be a series of volumes, with any fingerprints which do not already exist in Azure being copied to Azure. The cloud snapshots that we take are policy based, and we can keep those for hours, days, weeks, months, years, whatever our policy requires, we can do that. And this provides us with a usable, accessible recovery point that we can use to perform either a full volume restore or to restore an individual file or folder if someone's accidentally deleted some documents or something. So the cloud snapshot process itself is quick, and the transfer process is improved in efficiency as the data being transferred is deduped and compressed prior to it being uploaded to Azure. And this is where the whole concept of fingerprints come in, is that we can also make sure that regardless of the number of snapshots we take, if a fingerprint exists in Azure, we don't store multiple copies of the same fingerprint. So let's take an example where we've got a 10 terabyte data set with perhaps a 1 terabyte rate of change. Even if we've taken 100 snapshots, we would only actually store 11 terabytes plus a small amount for metadata. So that provides us a great efficiency over other perhaps more traditional methods for taking backup. So I think what I've described is a simple and efficient, or you can see that it's a simple, efficient and policy-driven snapshot process. With all snapshot data, when we look back at our Azure storage platform, being replicated 6 times across different geographies. So North Europe, West Europe. So I think I can really safely say that is a sufficient backup, and probably one with more resiliency than most legacy tape or local disk-based backup solutions I see when I in place today when I look at and analyse people's DR capability. And I think that that does kind of answer my question and put my mind to rest earlier when I said, well, is a snapshot really a backup? Well, I think in this case it really is. Okay, we've kind of established that now our data is available to us in the cloud via cloud-based snapshots, and that means, as we can see from the slide, we can fail over between data centers or clone volumes and present them back to our on-premise servers. And better still, we can use these cloud-based snapshots to fail over volumes between appliances in different data centers. And what's really great, and I think we'll see this in a demo, is we can also fail over to an appliance running in Azure. So we have a virtual appliance that can run in the Azure cloud, and we can actually fail over or clone volumes to that virtual appliance as well. And we will see that in a moment or two. So before we get into a demo, I just want to take a minute to talk about recovery. It's normally quite a contentious slide when I put this one up, but really I will cover it, and perhaps the best way to appreciate it is to see the device in action, but we'll go through this slide anyhow. So recovery is normally a function of how quickly we can get data back after some kind of incident which has impacted data availability or data integrity. So that could be failure of a device, it could be some kind of corruption in a database. It could be anything that we'd typically need to restore data for. So, as I've already explained, using a StorSimple device, we can expose data that resides in the cloud as though it's local. And this allows us to enable an efficient means of disaster recovery. So, going back to the example where we've got this 10 terabyte data set, let's assume that we've taken a backup of that exists in the Azure storage as a cloud-based snapshot. We can take that snapshot that we have in Azure and using a new appliance present a view of that data to a local server. The local server will see the full 10 terabytes of data, and it's only when the server makes a request to access a data block that StorSimple will pull the fingerprints back from the cloud. So it's this approach that really results in huge efficiencies when we look at recovery times. So I think we'll see that, or certainly see some of the recovery features in our demo.
Hello, in this video today I'm going to demonstrate exactly how you go about failing over a physical StorSimple device to a virtual appliance should disaster strike. So to begin with, what we'll do, we'll log on to our Azure portal, which we've got just here, and we shall browse into the StorSimple section just on the left hand side. And we'll browse into our manager. And if we go into the devices tab, here we can see both of our devices pre-configured. So you've got our physical device on the top, which is an 8100, and our virtual device at the bottom. So in order to begin the failover, the physical device generally wouldn't say online at this point, but for demonstration purposes, we've left it online. And to begin the failover, we'll simply just click the failover button located towards the bottom. So the first menu we're given is where we can choose which volume containers we'd actually like to fail over to our virtual device. So I'm just going to do the one for now. So I'll highlight that and next. On the next page, it will simply give you a brief overview of what volumes actually reside within that volume container their size and the total capacity for all of the volumes. Then what you have to do is you have to choose a target device. Obviously, if you had multiple virtual devices, you can fail over to any on that given list. So we've only got the one, so we'll choose that and continue. And then on the last page, we just have to confirm the failover process. So at the bottom, there is a checkbox just to confirm that the volumes are offline. Generally speaking, in a disaster, they would be offline anyways. It would mean your device is completely out of order. So because our device is online, I have just manually taken those volumes offline for now, just so we don't incur any data loss or any issues along the way. So once we've confirmed that, we can simply complete the wizard. So that will now go away and it will create the job to initiate the failover. So if we click the View Job button towards the bottom, that will take us into the jobs view of the manager. And as you can see, the device failover is there, it's running. I'm going to shorten the sequence just so it's a bit quicker for the video. And there we have it, that's now complete. And if we hit the details button on the bottom, that will give us a bit more information of exactly what it's done in that process and how long it took. So at the top you can see it's created the storage account credentials, it's transferred any of the volume containers and the backups, it's restored those volumes, it's created the ACRs, and it's also created the backup schedules, which we did have defined on those volume containers. So it will continue to back it up whilst it's failed over. The time it's taken, it's only taken 2 minutes. I mean, there's not a lot of data, but it doesn't take long at all, whether it be a few gigs or a few terabytes to migrate across or to fail over. So obviously now that's failed over, the ACRs that it creates are the same as what were given to those volumes anyway. So the volumes will now be presented to the same iSCSI targets. So what we're going to have to do, we're going to have to go in and change those. To do that, what we'll have to do is browse to the virtual device. And we'll have to browse into the volume container and we'll see the one which we've just failed over just there at the top. And we'll have to click into that. And for each volume, you just have to hit the modify button towards the bottom. And we can ignore the first page. The first page is just going to be a general modification setting, so whether you wanted to change the name or the size or anything else. So for now, we'll just proceed to the next stage. And here it is where it'll ask for that ACR for the volume. So we're going to change that from the old physical on-site server to an Azure server, which we've got running in the cloud. So we'll change that and we'll complete the setup wizard. That will now go away and it'll update the ACR for that volume, so we can now see that volume in our Azure VM. That won't take long at all, so that's going to be complete just now. Now that that's done, all we have to do is we can browse to our Azure VM. I've already set up this server to have access to the StorSimple virtual device, so all it's going to require is within disk management we can simply just run a rescan of the disks. It will go away, query the iSCSI StorSimple, and it will find that disk. And all we have to do is right click, turn the volume online, and that's it. We now have that volume there, ready to use in an Azure VM, all in the cloud, all very quickly. Very, very simple process, which is what we want of a DR scenario. So as I've mentioned, you will have to change the ACRs for all of the volumes just so you can map them through to a server you've got running within Azure. Obviously you can have those presented back to your hosts if you had an adequate VPN set up between Azure and your local site. That's generally not recommended just because of the performance hit you'll take going down that route. So generally you're best off just adding that into an Azure VM, getting it all set up there, and you'll be up and running in no time. And that's all there is to it. It's a very simple and straightforward process, and the failover between a physical StorSimple device to a virtual device is complete. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I hope that gave you a good look at some of the DR failover capabilities we have within StorSimple. We do have some videos on our YouTube channel which show some of this stuff as well. So if you want to see more sort of at your leisure, some more sort of on-demand videos, you can jump over to our YouTube channel, watch those there. And also, if you're interested, we can also demonstrate this some more functionality one-to-one with you at another time. But moving through the webinar today, I'm conscious we want to make sure we've got a good amount of time for questions at the end with Ben. So let's take a look at this slide. So one of my favourite, I guess, quotes on here really is on-demand storage. It's kind of, I guess, a bit of a marketing term in a way, but let's consider a traditional SAN environment. And let's say we need an additional, I don't know, let's say 20 terabytes of capacity. And if we assume that we haven't got that available to us over provisioned on the SAN, we have to go through a procurement process. So that could then lead to installing a new storage shelf or disks. We then configure the appliance and so on. And worst case, it may even be that we can't extend our storage array any further, and then we have to buy a whole new array, ultimately, using up time and costing us money. So in the StorSimple world, we can simply create the additional volume up to, or perhaps in excess of, say, the 20 terabytes we actually need, so we can make it 30, 40 terabytes. StorSimple then scales out using cloud storage. We just create the volume, present it to the host, and then the StorSimple device does all the clever stuff in the background based upon access to this data. Some other sort of pillars on the slide there. We've got consolidated management, which is pretty cool with StorSimple. So when we think about the rich backup and DR capabilities that we have in our StorSimple solution, some of which we've demonstrated to you, we can manage all of this, our on-premise devices, the backups, the restore jobs, all via the Azure portal. So we don't need to learn separate management consoles for storage, backup, and DR. So really, we can manage our whole storage platform, our device, our backup, our DR, all via anywhere with an internet connection via the Azure portal. And something which a lot of people overlook, and it's new to the 8000 series, and it is a really, really compelling offering, is the fact that we can present volumes to alternate servers running in Azure using our virtual appliance. And on the slide, we're calling this on-demand infrastructure. And whereby, let's say, using that analogy of on-demand infrastructure, we want to run some data analysis against live data. So typically, in a traditional model, we'd maybe then have to create an environment for this data. We'd provision some capacity in our data center somewhere. Let's hope we've got it. And then we'd have to get the data restored, present it to some servers, and all of that would be taking time, effort, and a lot of our on-premise resources. But rather than having to do this, we can simply clone the live data volume, present this via our virtual appliance to some alternate servers running in Azure, and when we finish doing our data analysis, or whatever we're doing, we can simply remove the clone, shut down the Azure servers, and that can all be done very, very quickly. And at a fraction of the cost normally associated with having to perform something like this on premise. So I want to cover how we're seeing StorSimple used out there in our customer base today, specifically with an eye on suitable applications and workloads. And what we're seeing during proof of concepts and with live customer deployments is that the StorSimple 8000 is now a much, much more rounded storage platform than its predecessor. And it is suitable for supporting sort of more performance demanding workloads than the 7000 series was. So StorSimple supports workloads like file shares, so any file archives, and in fact really most unstructured data is a great workload to move to StorSimple. Virtual machines, SQL databases, SharePoint blob using RBS, and potentially SharePoint content databases can all be supported on StorSimple. And there is a caveat there around performance, and we can talk about that in a second. So once we use StorSimple for these workloads, we can really start to embrace the power of the cloud for scalability and DR testing. And what I must point out, and it would really be remiss of me not to, is that StorSimple isn't necessarily suitable for every workload. So, for example, it's not suitable as a high-performance VDI storage platform. That's just not something you'd want to do with StorSimple. And again, if we've got, we do obviously support virtual machines, but if we have something which requires a VM which requires really high performance, again, StorSimple may not be suitable. But to me, and in my mind, and certainly what we're seeing, is what StorSimple does do fantastically well is enable us to meet this challenge that we spoke about earlier of data growth, straight on, whilst reducing the costs and complexities associated with backup and DR. And we speak to customers quite frequently who tell me that, a year or so ago they did some storage growth predictions and they're just not meeting the actual demand. And what we typically see is that, quite often when we sort of start to delve into that in a bit more detail, that VM database requirements tend to be fairly flat in terms of growth. Email grows a bit larger, outside of the planned growth rate. But what we really are seeing is explosive growth in unstructured data, and specifically around data shares. And I've actually seen examples where we've seen sort of 150, 200% growth in unstructured data over 12 months. And the real challenge is that this is quite often caused by project-related work, whereby we're implementing new systems to meet emerging business needs. And because this data growth is linked to business initiative and change, it is really very hard for us as IT pros and IT managers to actually predict that data growth is there, because it's just something we don't know about. It'd be great if we all had a crystal ball, but we just can't imagine that this is necessarily going to happen, or can't plan for it. So as data demands grow and we have this growth in unstructured data, rather than invest in expanding our tier 1 storage platform, I say we'll leverage StorSimple as a solution to reduce the capacity requirements on the existing tier 1 storage infrastructure. And we can do that by moving the workloads that really are suitable for StorSimple to it, and free up space on this primary tier 1 platform for the workloads which do need a really, really high level of performance. So effectively we then use StorSimple to create a very cost-effective second tier storage platform, as well as saving us the investment in expanding our tier 1 storage, which can be typically very, very expensive. That said, we do have customers that find, they can use StorSimple as their primary and only storage platform, and all of that does depend on workload planning and performance, and that's certainly something the cloud and infrastructure team here at SOL-TEC can help you with. So, before I hand over to Matt, who's going to talk a little bit more about the commercials around StorSimple, I'm just going to show you one more slide very quickly, which just illustrates the specifications of the different devices in the 8000 range. I'm not going to dwell on this too much. The primary difference, as you'll see on the slide, is that the 8600 model has significantly more local and total capacity. So really, it's almost like a second disk shelf in effect under the 8000 series. So without further ado, I will hand over to my colleague Matt, who's going to cover the commercials and some of the StorSimple offers that are available from Microsoft today. And then after Matt, I think we're going to hear from, we'll open the mics up and do some Q&A with Ben. Thanks very much for listening to me. More than happy to take any questions at the end. If there's anything by email, my email address is pcollins@soltec.com, so please feel free to reach out to me via email. Thanks again for your time. Thank you.
So I'm just going to take you through now the current offers from Microsoft and exactly how you go about buying StorSimple. So first of all, just to cover off one thing, obviously everyone's looking at the pricing, but also on the left hand side there in the green is the 7000 series. Basically the 7000 series is an older appliance. It doesn't have the virtual appliance that you get with the 8000 series, and the architecture and most importantly the network connectivity is slower. So since that's been since the 8000 series has been released, Microsoft actually hasn't shipped a single 7000 series unit. So it is there, but it's not something that people are buying, so we're going to focus this on the 8000 series. So first of all, just to clarify how this is bought. So StorSimple isn't something that you can go and buy in a traditional way where you speak to your reseller and just say, I would like a StorSimple appliance, place an order, and then it ships to you. StorSimple is actually purchased through an Azure commitment, so you buy a commitment to a certain value and Microsoft will ship you a free 8100 or 8600 depending on the commit, which I'll come into in a second. And if you want to buy multiple appliances, if either for single site deployment or multi-site deployment, however you want to run it, then you just buy multiples of that commitment, and for each amount then you get a free StorSimple appliance. So Microsoft are running a promotion at the moment. It's called ASAP Plus, and there's two key facets to this. First of all is the price, which is obviously people's main concern. So for the you've got the ASAP Plus 60 and the ASAP Plus 100. The 60 is what you use to get the 8100 appliance, and the 8600 is on the 100. Basically, they signify the dollar amounts. So for the 8100, you buy a commit of $60,000, and Microsoft will send you the appliance. This is down from the standard price of $75,000. And there's an even bigger discount on the 8600, which has come down from $150,000 down to $100,000. So that's the commit that you need to buy to get those appliances. If you wanted two 8100s, then you would basically buy a commit of $120,000, and that's what you would get. Please excuse the dollar pricing on this. It's just basically what Microsoft use worldwide, and it's the standard. Everything that they do is published in dollars, and then we just work back from there. But to give you an idea, the $60,000 8100, or the commit that you need to get the 8100, is roughly £38,000, just to put that into context. Now, I said there's two facets to this. The second side of it I actually think is more important than the price reduction in terms of the offer. So what used to happen is that you would buy the commit for the StorSimple appliance, and then that would be allocated to the storage capacity that you would use for StorSimple, and that was tied into that. Now, what Microsoft are doing with this particular offer, which runs until the end of June 2015, is that you buy the Azure EA essentially commit, and that allows you to not only use the commit that you've bought for the Azure storage for the StorSimple appliance, but it also gives you the ability to use it for anything in the StorSimple portfolio, and this is really compelling. So in the first year, for instance, you're going to be migrating data onto the appliance. That's actually going to only start using the cloud storage for actual storage once you hit the thresholds on the appliance, as mentioned. So actually you're possibly not going to be using that much storage in the cloud. You're going to have an amount that you're using for the snapshots, but you're not going to be. It's not going to be a case of you're extending, or it's unlikely that you're going to be extending too much out or using the full amount. So there is going to be an amount of commit that you've got remaining. It's not something that rolls over onto years 2 and 3. So this capacity actually, or the ability to use that for the Azure EA, means that you can actually get money back from that. You can build servers, you can run web services, media services, machine learning, whatever it is that you want. So this is particularly useful if you have got a cloud strategy, and if you're looking at hybrid storage, then it would suggest that you have to some extent, but this then allows you to offset the cost of the StorSimple appliance, essentially reducing the appliance, because you've already got whatever you're going to use on the Azure spend. And likewise, the way that the billing works with Microsoft is it's quite easy to identify departments. So if you're building servers or services for other departments within the business and you have the ability, then you can charge that back. So all of this is allowing you to offset the cost of the StorSimple appliance, or reduce it further by actually billing that out to other departments. As I mentioned, it doesn't roll over, so at the end of year one, what would happen with the EA is you would look where you were, what you'd spent in year one, and with the data growth rates, what you anticipate that you would spend in year two, and then you true up or true down, depending on how aggressively your data migrating data and what your data growth is. It's likely to come down, but at the end of year one, it may well stay the same. It depends on your adoption really of the cloud. But yes, you can do that. Essentially, if you wanted to, you could true it down to 0. It's not something that we see happen, but just as an example. And then as your data grows, then you just true up that commit, or as you're using more Azure, you would just true that up, and then you just have the support costs on top of that as well, shown there at the bottom. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Microsoft pay for the shipping, and also for the installation services as well. So as a StorSimple partner, one of the things which we do in addition to consultancy beforehand is we also do the deployments post delivery as well. So I've mentioned there about using the Azure commit and the value that I think that offers with the current deals from Microsoft. So I've just put a slide up here. I'm not entirely sure how much any of you know about Microsoft Azure. So obviously it's Microsoft's cloud hosting or cloud platform, and that includes the ability to either run software as a service type applications, platform as a service, where Microsoft are managing up to everything up to the operating system, and you're just building the applications on top of that, or infrastructure as a service, which is running up to the hypervisor layer. Obviously, this is the best platform for, it's a Microsoft platform for Microsoft products, and that's what people would expect. What does take some people by surprise is the fact that it's much more diverse than that. So for instance, you've got Linux servers, you can deploy Oracle databases, you've got things like WordPress servers. There's the scope's much more diverse than just Microsoft, and the important thing with this is that it all works in the same way. So you're only ever paying for what you use as you use it. So if you turn a server on for 5 hours in a day, you'll charge for the servers for that 5 hours for that day, and that includes the server and also the operating system or any licenses that go with it. So in the same way that if you deployed a Microsoft SQL server, that would apply, but if you deployed an Oracle database instead, exactly the same thing applies. All your licensing's covered, and you're only charged for what you use, and all of these are everything that you're seeing on the screen, and it's much more diverse than this. The range of servers and services available through the portal is just growing all the time, and so these are all pre-deployable images, and they all work in exactly the same way. So that's just a very, very brief overview, obviously, of Azure and the potential that this offers in tandem with the ASAP Plus offer to get the appliance in the scope of everything that you can do with it. Obviously, this is a much broader topic, and again, this is something that we can cover off separately. It's something else that we do webinars on, so if you're interested, let us know, and we can tell you when we're running the next one, or engage on a one-to-one basis as necessary. So just to finish off with a summary of everything that Paul said, and just bring this all together. So the hybrid cloud storage and StorSimple presents a number of benefits. So first most obviously, and one of the real hooks for this is you're lowering the total cost of ownership by 40 to 60%. This is numbers that Microsoft have provided by research anecdotally. Some people are reporting more than that, but 40 to 60 is comfortable. Although having said that, 40-60% is based on the standard pricing, and there's some significant savings with the ASAP Plus offer, so you're already onto a win there. You are getting this whole package, so with StorSimple you are getting, like for instance with the 8100, you're getting a 2-year appliance which offers you 200 terabytes of storage, and that's primary storage, that's the snapshot offsite replication, that's the long-term archiving storage, and you've also got this incredible in the cloud DR solution, or to another site DR solution with the response times that you get from having a solution which just recovers the metadata. So that's again is incredibly compelling, and I say most importantly, one of the big factors with this is because you're essentially commoditizing the unstructured data, or the data that you put onto StorSimple, because it offers everything that it does in point 2, with all the management and everything. You are freeing up time, and you're becoming, as a business, you're becoming more agile because you're able to respond quicker to demands, and it does allow you to concentrate on actually what is going to benefit the business. You're not managing storage, you're not managing the additional capacity, the backups and everything else. It actually allows you to get on with the core functionality, which benefits both internal and external users of your systems. It's an incredibly compelling argument. If you'd like to know more, then please do get in touch. There's some more information on our website, SOL-TEC.com/StorSimple-8000. So thank you very much for attending today, and as I say, if there's anything else that you would like to know, either technically around the office or what have you, then we're more than happy to engage. Likewise with Azure generally, so please just let us know. And handing over now if anyone's got any questions. Thank you very much.